Our next story takes us to New York City. Gorgeous nighttime skyline view close-up there of the Chrysler Building. Well, New York City Mayor Eric Adams appearing in federal court today, standing before a federal judge alongside his attorneys about the pending dismissal of the indictment against him. Well, that very federal judge did not rule on that question today. Remember, that is who has to give the sign-off on whether or not his corruption indictment will be dismissed. Fox's Connor Hansen has more from New York.
A judge overseeing Mayor Eric Adams' corruption charges has yet to make a decision on dropping the high-profile case.
Hochul forced him to resign.
Protesters in New York City gathered outside the courthouse Wednesday.
Honestly, it felt like it's a mockery every time I turn the TV on.
Critics, including an opponent in New York's upcoming mayoral race, say the Justice Department's request to drop the corruption charges is corrupt itself.
Do you have leaders in place that can deliver core services without fear or favor or loyalty to Donald Trump?
They believe it's a quid pro quo, or trade in exchange for Mayor Adams going along with President Trump's new immigration policies. Adams has denied any deal was made.
There was no promise of exchange, in exchange for anything. There has been discussion, I think, about Mayor Adams helping with immigration enforcement, but that's basically him complying with the law that's already on the books.
The mayor faces charges for bribery, fraud, and taking illegal foreign donations. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is considering taking the unprecedented step of removing the mayor, but said she will wait to see how the court process plays out.
Because I'm going nowhere. I'm going to be the mayor.
The Justice Department has asked for the charges to be dropped without prejudice, meaning they could be brought again. Mayor Adams told the judge he understands the terms. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thanks so much. In the meantime here, let's bring into the conversation former federal prosecutor and legal analyst Nima Rahmani, and he joins me, our friend there. Nima, good to see you. You've been helping us make sense legally of this story really ever since it got moving here, the dismissal aspect of this case. Were you surprised today that the judge did not issue any type of ruling or sign off on the dismissal or not? Is this how the thing goes?
I wasn't surprised, Andrew, but I do expect Judge Ho to dismiss this case. There's not really a whole lot he can do, and I know we've talked about it, but just to recap, he's a judge, and he's essentially the umpire in the case. If the prosecution and the defense want the case dismissed, you can't force the executive branch to proceed with the prosecution. His only real option, if he wanted to do so, let's say he thought that the prosecutors were bribed or there was some really improper reason, he would have to appoint a special counsel, not a Jack Smith type special counsel, but this was a case that we saw recently, a state case, but Jussie Smollett in Chicago, where the prosecutor there, Cook County prosecutor, didn't want to move forward with the case, entered into a non-prosecution agreement. The judge had an issue with it and appointed a special counsel, who actually happened to be a U.S. attorney, Dan Webb, to take over that case. But there still has to be someone in the executive branch, might be independent of the Department of Justice because he or she is a special counsel, to move forward with the case. But absent that appointment, this case will be dismissed.
But does the judge need both sides, especially Emile Beauvais at the DOJ? Does Beauvais need to explain the rationale to a judge of why they're bringing an ask for dismissal here or not? I mean, have you seen any of the rationales given in court today about why the Trump DOJ wants this dismissed? And if so, what did they look like?
Emile Beauvais usually doesn't have to give any real explanation. Prosecutors have discretion all the time to dismiss cases. Now, what he should have done is said that this is not a good use of Department of Justice resources. That would have put the issue to bed. Or he could have said it's not the strongest case in the world in terms of the benefits received. Or he could have said that there's an issue with how the Supreme Court has ruled on bribery cases. They really need a quid pro quo or a specific exchange of an official act before that act is committed. If a gift is received later as a gratuity, it may not be a bribe. So there's a number of potential challenges with the case. Beauvais made the mistake of saying that he's doing this because Adams has an election this year And he's doing this because Adams is cooperating with immigration enforcement. Those aren't reasons that are typically given, but even with those reasons, there's not much Judge Ho can do with this.
Okay, but he did issue publicly those rationales in the memo that was obtained by so many news outlets about why they're pursuing the dismissal. So wouldn't he have to bring them up in court before the judge as the reason why?
Well, what Emile Beauvais said in court is, and when it was pushed on this, said the judge really can't inquire into the issue. I mean, it was respectful, but that was his position. The reason for the dismissal is not something that the judge can inquire into, as long as it's not a completely impermissible reason. Like I said, fraud, a bribe, some other illegality that would make the dismissal unjust. This may just be a rubber stamp type situation, again, unless Judge Ho takes the unprecedented step. And we've seen it before. We've talked about other cases. I talked about Jussie Smollett, talked about the Michael Flynn case when this originally came up. The Department of Justice wanted to allow Flynn to pull back his guilty plea and dismiss that case. The judge in that case tried to stop that dismissal, but ultimately he was also overturned on appeal.
So, Nima, you and I last talked about this case in the wake of some of the resignations in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York over this very deal that was struck here. I want to put this statement up from Emile Beauvais just today. This was gotten by Hugo Lowell there at The Guardian. And Beauvais says this, I'm going to read it in full, it's cut off. He says, I went to New York today to show the men and women of the Justice Department, as well as the American people, that I am personally committed to our shared fight, ending weaponized government, stopping the invasion of criminal illegal aliens, and eliminating drug cartels and transnational gangs from our homeland. For those at the department who are with me in those battles and understand that there are no separate sovereigns in this executive branch, we're going to do great things to make America safe again. For those who do not support our critical mission, I understand there are templates for resignation letters available on the websites of the New York Times and CNN. So quite the broadside there. Again, some of these prosecutors and some of these U.S. attorneys' offices nationwide who might disagree with Beauvais' assertions here. Of course, this comes one day after President Trump posted on Truth Social saying that he is carte blanche going to eliminate wholly all of the Biden-era U.S. attorneys. Your thoughts?
Well, eliminating the Biden-era U.S. attorneys is common when a new administration comes in. The presidentially appointed and Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys usually submit their resignation. Sometimes the new administration keeps them on, but usually there is turnover there. But let me tell you why I don't think Emile Beauvais is being genuine. Had he wanted to dismiss this case, he could have signed that dismissal himself. He is a supervising attorney at the Department of Justice. He doesn't need Danielle Sassoon to sign off on it. He doesn't need someone in the public integrity section. He can file that dismissal himself. So why is he trying to strong arm his subordinates who do not believe the dismissal is supported by law? Why is he rounding up career prosecutors at the Department of Justice and saying that one of you needs to sign this or all of you are going to be fired, right? Had he wanted to take ownership of this and say, this is my decision, you file that request for dismissal yourself. Ultimately, he did, and he actually signed it with a wet signature, which is not something that you typically see. These are electronically signed. But I think this was much ado about nothing. It was trying to really flex his muscle and force the issue, which was really unnecessary in this case.
All right, Nima, last part about this story, because it is political in nature. Now the calls for resignation from so many of Eric Adams's former Democratic allies now who want to see him step away from City Hall in the wake of this. You remember a lot of calls for resignation came in the wake of the indictment being handed down against Adams. And now it has been somewhat turbocharged in the wake of this controversy here surrounding the pending dismissal of that very indictment. So there's a lot of calls for Adams to resign here. But what about New York Governor Kathy Hochul? I'm not an expert on New York's state constitution or its state charter, but from what Hochul said a couple nights ago, never in the Empire State's history has a governor essentially rid a municipality of a duly elected mayor, calling for some local officials to step down and to vacate the position here. We don't know the inside of her mind or these conversations that are going on with her and some of these stakeholders that she met with today. She has not called on him to resign. But if you could you explain that power that Hochul has? Because it is not with just the stroke of a pen or what have you. It is a laborious process. It's almost like an impeachment trial, is it not?
Yes, and let's talk about the many different political layers before we get to Governor Hochul. Obviously, Emile Beauvais was Donald Trump's personal attorney before he was appointed to this position at the Department of Justice. Let's talk about Judge Dale Ho, obviously a Biden appointee. He has a very liberal background. He worked for the ACLU and before that, the NAACP. You have Mayor Adams involved in this race where he's certainly going to be challenged in the primary by Democrats, may even decide to register and run as a Republican. And of course, Governor Hochul. And under New York state law, there is this unique provision that allows her to remove or suspend the mayor. Now, he has the right to be heard. There are some procedural safeguards, but my understanding is her ability to remove him is more or less limitless. There's not a whole lot that Adams can do to prevent it. So there's this whole political layer. Obviously, the governor has said she wants to wait to see how the criminal process plays out. But I do believe that this dismissal is going to happen in a matter of a day or days. And it's really going to be up to Governor Hochul. The ball is going to be in our court of what to do with Mayor Adams. Let him continue being mayor and fight it out during the primary, or to remove him.
You know, I would imagine that those political questions for Hochul are quite substantial and quite dicey because it just so happens to be an election year. Adams saying he's not stepping down. He's not going to resign. He is still running for re-election. The primary is in June. The general is in November. So we just have to wait and see. Nima Romani, as always, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Talk real soon.